Ok. Es un placer para mí presentar al doctor Simon Morrison. Es profesor de música, lengua y literatura eslava en la Universidad de Princeton. Su libro sobre el ballet del Bolshoi se está traduciendo actualmente en Rusia y en estos momentos está trabajando sobre una historia cultural de Moscú. Nos va a presentar la ponencia Still in Search of Satanilla. So, all your time.
Okay, thank you. Forgive me for reading in English. I'm embarrassed about that. I'm very grateful for the invitation to participate in this conference, and especially grateful to Laura Ormegon, who shared some of her marvelous research on Spanish and Madrid ballet for me. And so much of what I'm going to say about a ballet called Satanilla is indebted to her research and her very intrepid study of the Teatro del Circo in Madrid. So I'm going to talk about a ballet that has an important role in Spanish 19th century ballet history. The work is called, well, it has many names. One of them is Satanilla. Another one is Satanilla. Another name in French is Le Diable Amoureux. And the name of it in, sorry, I'm just looking at a comment. So once again, the name of the ballet in French is Le Diable Amoureux, and then when it came to Spain, in Madrid in 1845, it was called El Diablo Enamorado. The premiere of the work took place in Paris in 1840, and then 5 years later, it was premiered in Madrid. So the point I want to make about this ballet is that it deserves reconstruction because we have the music, we have choreographic notation, we have a lot of images, we have a lot of variants of the scenario, and we have a lot of photographs of the work. And why I think this ballet is important to Spanish history is that when we tend to think about 19th century ballet, we tend to think about an amalgam that includes obviously a syntax that derives from French court dances, as well as Italian virtuoso physical acrobatic influences. We tend to think about plots that include people whose hearts are broken and then fixed, kingdoms inhabited by the living and the dead, a lot of incredible spectacle, a lot of wonderful special effects, geometric constructions, and so forth. One of the things that I think is neglected in 19th century ballet history is how important Spanish dances were to the repertoire. And when I mean this, I mean not simply ballets that were set in Spain, but also the fact that Spanish dances were used for scenes that were set in Persia and Islam and the Muslim world in general, owing to the fact, obviously, that Spain has a rich and distinguished alignment with Muslim culture. So that is part of what I'm going to say today, along with the fact that this is a very messy and strange ballet. It's a work that's associated with Marius Petipa, owing to the fact that he took this ballet via France, via Spain to Russia, and there performed it in St. Petersburg and Moscow. He staged it with his father there. And this is one of the ballets that is technically lost, but I think we can find it. In fact, I've been trying to find it for several years now, and I'm indebted to Laura and others for helping me to find it. One of the things that I love about this ballet is that it's a very messy, chaotic. It's a ballet that reminds us that of the 15 or so ballets that are performed all of the time in the 19th century canon, some of the best ones disappeared. And when I say that this is one of the best ones, I mean it's a work that appealed to all types of people. If you wanted entertainment that was erotic, you got it in this ballet. If you wanted entertainment that was exotic, you got it in this ballet. If you wanted special effects, you got it. If you wanted the supernatural, you got it. If you wanted love stories, you got it. If you wanted pirates, you got it. If you wanted harems, you got it. You got everything. It was an amazing work. And it's one of these kind of bric-a-bracs, collages, montages that reminds us that 19th century ballet was far messier than we tend to think of it. And that I wonder what would happen of our perception of this art form if, for example, we had this work performed still, as it was performed routinely in the 19th century. What about the work by Petipa called Magic Pills? What about the ballet called Florida? What about the original version of Don Quixote, which obviously had a distinct Spanish imprint? We don't have these works performed, and we lose a lot of cultural context and political context, and the idea that supernatural ballets were about, among other things, disease, and that they were far more cosmopolitan. A lot of this was stripped out of the repertoire, and that's why I'm interested in this work. So this is a composition that has a plot that is impossible to summarize, so I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to say a few things about it. This is the scenario that was published in 1840 for the Paris premiere. The prima ballerina was Pauline Leroux for this performance, and she was marvelous in the role, according to the critics. The plot, I'm just going to say a few things about it. It involves a Spanish nobleman. His name is Fabio. He is somebody who is bored in life. He is somebody who is like Faust. He is disappointed by material existence. He has a lot of problems, including the fact that he's a gambling addict. He has a lot of debt problems. He lusts after various women. He's also prone to violence. And he has problems also with Christianity, that is to say, rejecting it. And he has a troubled psychology. So he has a lot of problems, and he tries to solve them by entering the realm of the supernatural and the occult. And there he meets a very beautiful attraction, a devilette ballerina, Satanilla. Basically what happens here is the devil is summoned. Satanilla is brought to earth in order to steal his soul. Instead, she falls in love with him. She gets involved with the other women in his life. These women, a couple of them are abducted by pirates. They go to Persia. They end up getting rescued. Satanilla is taken back down to hell, where she has an encounter with Beelzebub, who actually says to her, interrogates her, complains to her, why didn't you steal this person's soul? That was your mission. And she basically confesses she's in love with him. She tries again. She fails. She cannot get over her love for the nobleman. And in the end, she is rescued from hell, rescued from her predicament by angels who take her to heaven. So a lot of wildness within this work. I have some images from early on in the history of it. These are from Paris. This is Leroux, who is in the title role of Satanilla here. Her name, when she appears on earth, embodied either as a woman or as a man. She actually cross-dresses within this ballet. Her name is Uriel. And there is her costume. There's a bit of Orientalia in the sort of fez on top of her head. This is a girl named Lilia, who's a girl who loves our nobleman hero, Fabio, or anti-hero, and she loves him back, and she's the one who's captured by pirates and is ultimately rescued. There's also another woman in the mix named Phoebe. This is a racist caricature. You see there the devil with dark makeup on. And this is an image that's taken not from the Paris Palais Garnier premiere, but from one of the parodies of the ballet that immediately were performed. This one took place in one of the Boulevard theaters, but this is an image of the interrogation of Satanilla by Beelzebub. And she's saying, I love this person, look at the cross he gave me, and so forth. So that's the basic layout of the work. The scenario was written by Henri de Saint-Georges, who is most famous, I think, for us as the co-scenarist of the plot of Giselle. The choreography, the original choreography, was done by Joseph Mazilier. We don't know much about Mazilier, unfortunately, but we do have a good sense of the choreography of this work because it was notated and preserved. The music is by two composers. Two composers wrote the music of this work, which is not so unusual for 19th century ballet. It's a little strange for us, but we have Francois Benoit, who composed the music for Acts 1 and Act 3. He was pretty good. And then his colleague, Henri Rébert, composed the music for the second act. The two of them worked together at the Paris Conservatoire. My sense of it is that there's not much musical relationship between the second act, which was by Rébert, and the first and third acts, which were by Benoit. But both composers made use of a lot of borrowings and quotations from other works about devils and the supernatural and so on and so forth. So what you have here is borrowings in the music from Louis Spohr, an opera about Faust. We have borrowings from various other harem ballets that are set in the Ottoman Empire context. We have borrowings also from various rescue operas. So it's actually a score that actually, when you go through it, you can hear a lot of echoes from other works at the time. One of the people who loved the score and thought this was a pretty good ballet was Hector Berlioz, who is a very famous 19th century composer. He said, you know, it's a noisy work. The orchestration is pretty good. And the borrowings are very smart in the sense that, you know, they borrow from works that relate to the plot of this composition. And he also said that the middle act music by Reber was not as interesting as the opening acts. So one of the things I was able to do was actually get the original score and the original parts for this ballet from Paris. And these are more or less, I think, what were performed in 1845 in Madrid. And here's the opening of Act 2. This is a banquet scene, and you hear a lot of, well, Rossini within this composition. Okay, so that's fun. That's just the opening curtaining, opening music. Now, what I want to do is actually play you a piece of music which is very, very difficult, nasty to transcribe. It took me a long time. What you're hearing, obviously, is a computer playback of this music, but it gives you a good sense of the visual and choreographic high point of the entire ballet, which is the pas de séduction, the seduction dance. This is a dance that has multiple parts. This is a dance that takes place in Isfahan, Persia. This is a dance that involves Satanilla entertaining the Grand Vizier, who's the kind of, you know, chief advisor, prime minister to the Sultan. And basically she seduces him, so that allows the heroine of the ballet, Lily, to escape enslavement in this Persian context. So what's interesting here is the pas de séduction is a multi-part construction, many dances here, and despite the fact that we're in Persian, most of the dances are Spanish, and this obviously relates to the fact that our choreographer Mazilier did not have access to the Persian syntax, did not know Persian dances, but he had a good sense of the Spanish repertoire, and so why not just have Spanish dances in Persian? No problem. There's a historical reason for that, perhaps. So, but the pas de séduction, which takes place in Persia, opens with a dance that's called the Anglais, so the English dance. And then it is followed by a bolero. And then you have a burlesque distortion of a waltz. And then you have the Vizier performing with Satanilla. He's sitting on a mat initially, and then he gets up and hands her a tambourine, and then she does the showcase dance of all, which is the tarantella. This is the tarantella from the third act of the ballet. This is a bit of the music, and then we're going to talk about the choreography in a minute. Okay, so this is a little too slow. There's some odd notes in there that I probably need to fix. The hand claps are an imagination. When I listen to this music, it's similar to the tarantella that is featured in the Bournonville Ballet, Napoli. So there is a stylistic connection between the two things. All right, our focus here, however, has to be the choreography. We don't know much about Mazilier in general in terms of his career, but we benefit here in the same way that Doug Fullington and Marion Smith benefit in terms of their research on Giselle by the fact that a person named Henri Justement, who lived until 1890, was born in 1815, a French choreographer and a French kind of ballet historian based in Bordeaux and Marseille and Lyon. He actually wrote down in his own notation the choreography of this work. Now, this is not all of the choreography, but this is a lot of it. I would say it's about 75% of what was seen on stage. Henri Justement was French, but he wasn't grammatically literate in the sense that he wrote down French phonetically. So there's a lot of mistakes in his French spellings. But the manuscript that he created of Le Diable Amarou, or El Diablo Enamorado, is beautiful. This is an exquisite manuscript. It's about 125 pages long. You can take each page and put it in a frame and hang it in your living room. It's wonderful. It has choreographic descriptions in writing of certain dances, including the pas de séduction, as well as these choreographic drawings. One of the beautiful features of Justement's manuscript is he does not make gender differentiation. So at the top here, you actually see both a boy and a girl. They both look like ballerinas in tutus, but the difference between them is the color of the ink that is used there. He uses broken lines. He uses circles. The devil is a stick figure with a pitchfork. And basically, he's able, with this choreographic system, both to designate where the groups are, the corps de ballet. He's also able to designate the types of positioning on the stage, the angles, and so on and so forth. He also indicates where pantomime takes out. He actually writes out the pantomime. And for longer, more complicated dances like the pas de séduction suite of dances, he actually has pages of written description of what takes place. So this is not Nazilier's choreography. This is not what took place in 1840. It's not what took place in 1845 in Madrid, but it's close. It's as close as we're going to get. The reviews are very smart of this ballet and very detailed, but they actually don't obviously talk too much about the steps, the choreography, except for naming quotations and so forth. This manuscript is preserved in Germany at the University of Cologne. And again, it's as close as we can get to what happened in 1840 in Paris and 1845 in Madrid. Basically, what takes place in the Tarantella dance, according to Justement, are actually fairly conventional movements: jeté, coupé, fouetté, sauté, coupé, 4 turns, repeat over and over again, pas de bourrées, etc. All of that is notated. There's nothing especially innovative or interesting about the syntax compared to other works. But what is interesting is the stylistic diversity that he's able to pull off within this choreography. So it's a borderline burlesque. It's also very classical at the same time. So you have this kind of street theater, street dance mixed together with syntax that is traditionally French, and the high collapses into the low. And why that's interesting is that this is a ballet about the high and the low. It's about heaven, it's about hell, it's about love, it's about lust. It's based on a novella that was borderline pornographic in places, but has a sublime element as well. The novel that it's based on is by Jacques Cazotte, who was a victim of the French Revolution. He was guillotined. What you see here is close to the end of the ballet. This is the scene in which our heroine is actually rescued by an angel, comes down and actually takes her back to heaven, and she's thus removed from the lower depths, and she survives. She earns transcendence owing to her love and the dedication that she shows to love and the experience of love. So this is the ending of the work. Now, I want to actually conclude by actually talking in the last few minutes of my time here. I'm going to have about 3-4 more minutes of speaking. Is this ballet moved from Paris to Madrid? And one of the big questions, it seems to me, in ballet history is how ballets traveled. Like, who brought this work from Paris to Madrid? And I conversed with Laura Armagon about this problem, as well as other people's, and it seems there's various theories about how a work, a ballet from Paris, goes all the way to Madrid. And the score that was used in 1845 is lost, owing to the fact that the theater in question was destroyed by fire. But the likeliest route of transmission was that the director of the Teatro del Circo actually brought this work to Madrid from Paris, or it might have traveled with the ballerina Marie-Guy Stéphane, who danced the work in Paris. And it might also have been associated with the Marius Petipa's brother Lucien, who actually was somebody who was involved in the Paris premiere and also ended up in Spain. So there are various possibilities of how it moved around. Now, the last thing that I'll say, I'm just going to check whether or not this comment in the chat actually pertains to me. is that the Madrid production of this work involved a composer and conductor from Bohemia named Johann Daniel Schostopole, who conducted the orchestra at the Circo from 1844 to 1847, and he got involved in the music and he changed it to make it more interesting for the local context. And the most important thing that he did was he actually removed a dance named the Krakow dance, the Krakowiak. He removed that dance and he replaced it with a mazurka. And according to research by Laura Armagon, this was the first time a mazurka was seen or performed at the Circo, and it's used in the Act 3 high point, and it was paired with another dance that was a castanet dance in triple meter, again to appeal to the local audiences. And I can give you a sense of this dance here. This is a piano version of it, but this is the mazurka that's performed in the Madrid version of El Diablo Amarando. Okay, and then the other novelty, so this was the mazurka that was actually inserted into Satanilla for the Spanish premiere. The other novelty has to do with when the work went to Russia. So Marius Petipa is in Madrid at this period in time, owing to problems in his personal life, scandalous problems in his personal life. He has to flee. He leaves Spain. He ends up in St. Petersburg, and he and his father arrives after him, bring this ballet with him. And one of the things that Marius Petipa did when he restored or recreated a Satanilla for the Russian stage was he brought with him another dance that he picked up in Madrid, which is called the Pas Tyrien. And it looks like this in the guitar transcription, which was probably performed in, you know, a sort of domestic or cafe setting. This is a work that comes from a composition named Ondine, and it was danced with Stéphane de Guy with castanets, and this ends up going all the way from Madrid to St. Petersburg and Moscow for the Moscow version of Satanilla. I had a colleague actually play this on guitar, so you can get a sense of it. Sorry that's not the most polished performance, but it's a lovely piece, and it's amazing to imagine this as being part of the Spanish and then the Russian version of Satanilla. This ballet, we have so much information about it. You can write entire books about this piece. I'm hoping to stage and restore at least a few of the dances to perform either here with some of our students or maybe in a professional context. Clearly the context is gone, the cosmopolitanism of the work, the audiences are gone, and the bodies are gone, but it's a work that's really important. It's really important because it actually shows us that ballet was far more wild and entertaining and diverse and international than we tend to think after it got stylized and whittled down in the repertoire. It's also important because of how Spanish this very famous work was. It's also important because the fact that it was performed from 1840 right up to the end of the 19th century in multiple cities across Europe, a lot of the time in Russia, and then it disappeared. And the question is, and this is the perennial question, is why was it that these great ballets, or popular ballets at least, came and went? Why did this work evaporate? What is the reason for that? Looking at the history of this work from start to finish, clearly this was an expensive show to perform. Budgets actually played a role in cutting it down and reducing it and shrinking the size of the work. So it disappeared and reappeared in the 19th century imperial repertoire. But you also have a change in tastes at the end of the 19th century. There are a lot of supernatural ballets owing to the fact that French grand operas were busy at this period in time, privileging plots that deal with history. So horror, demons, the supernatural were obviously found a lot in the feats of dancers. It's probably the case that over the course of time, because of the expense of this work, it was performed less frequently, and also because ultimately, there was no dancer to pass it on. There was nobody to remember the role after a gap that was occasioned by budget cuts. So nobody had the role in their feet and could teach it to their disciples in the Russian context. Also, the idea that there was a lot that was taboo about this work. It deals with a corrupt nobleman, which within an imperial aristocratic context was taboo. It deals with the supernatural, which tended to be a metaphor for disease. And it was also a work that, because it was a bric-a-brac entertainment, burlesque meant to appeal to children as well as to adults, to old and young alike. It was a work that actually did not seem to have intrinsic artistic value. So it was downplayed when you actually compare it to works like Swan Lake, which at a certain point were actually considered to have that kind of value. But for all sorts of cultural reasons, I actually think it's worth restoring, and I'm hoping to continue doing that. So thank you very much. I have a question from Rachel Strauss, but I can't hear the question.
Now you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Laura.
Yes, because I was saying marvelous things to you, but you do. So thanks for this outstanding presentation and for the love you deserve to this ballet and for the reconstruction that I hope we can see someday also, like you. And these musical examples that are also marvelous to hear how were these dances that were presented in Spain. So, ¿hay alguna pregunta?
Yes.
Sí. Paso aquí una pregunta y el micro.
Dr. Morrison, can you hear me?
I think no. There is now one question in the...
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry.
Yes, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, thank you very much. This is fascinating. Given that you've reconstructed works before at Princeton, I was wondering which sections of El Diablo Enamorado you were thinking would be worthy of reconstructing and why?
The projects we've done at Princeton have been educational, so it's like reconstructing or reimagining or putting these works on stage have been basically a good way to actually educate our students who in the history of dance and why dance and ballet is important. In this work, I would be interested in putting on the dances that the critics loved. All of them loved the Pas de Pirate. There was a pirate's dance that is a good piece of music. It's quotation, and the notation of that is very detailed, so that would be a lot of fun, which actually had a lot of sword waving and interesting sort of pantomime for the period in time. But I think I would go at this sequence, this seduction series, this suite, because you have such an incredible and bizarre stylistic diversity. It's like basically taking the second act suite of international dances of the Nutcracker and sticking them in a harem in Persia. It's very strange and very bizarre, but that's the one example where you actually see the real international and cosmopolitan dimension of this composition. So I think those two areas I'd focus on.
Thank you.
Okay, we have here one question.
Thank you very much, Simon Morris. I have a question here about maybe a deeper layer of the view on romantic ballet in that period. We have several descriptions and images of the devil, and of course that makes me think of the occult, the Satanism, and also Freemasonry. That was very much and is still very much a part of society, the higher upper class society. Now, reading the libretto from Deutsche Pharaona, La Fille du Pharaon from Marius Petipa, we have in the epilogue Freemasonry symbolism that is very present. We have the pyramid that is at the end illuminated at the top. So I'm right now working a bit on Le Diable à Quatre, also from Justement, and the devil is always present. Do we think we can find more layers of why the devil was so representative in ballet at that time?
It is a fascinating subject, and the Freemasonry angle. There is some aspect of the Justement notation of the choreography which suggests some of that kind of visual iconography. My general sense is there's a beautiful series of articles written by a ballet historian whose name eludes me, but it was called Behind the Veil of Translucence. And in this series of articles, the argument was made that empowered females and empowered women were often in the 19th century context, both objects of fascination and worship, the ideal feminine, these kind of tropes, as well as considered to be a threat to male, I suppose, Puritanism, the Christian order, and so forth. And so here, the representation of the prima ballerina and her embodiment as a figure associated with hell or the inferno or the demonic is basically this allegory for the idea that she is a threat to this nobleman and whatever Christian morality he's associated with. So that's one angle to it. The other has to do with Jacques Cazot, who actually wrote this novella. It's a very racy, very sexy thing. You can read it in English translation. In other languages, it was a big hit for its time. Justement was somebody who was anti-revolutionary, and then he was guillotined for his political activism. And he basically actually thought of these demonic forces as basically associated with revolutionary activities. So there's the idea here of a disturbance, not only a psychic disturbance, but a social, cultural, and political disturbance, I think, that are embodied in the demonic here. So I think that there are a lot of layers to it, and I think that the one you're working on is probably the most valuable, and there is some sense in the choreographic notation that might be embodied symbolically. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much, and we hope to see the reconstruction of your work.
Creo que
So do I.
¿Puedo hacer la pregunta que está en el chat o tenemos tiempo? Okay, one last question is in the chat. Joellen Megling asked, in Cazot's novel, the devil switches gender back and forth. Ballerinas to symbolize both genders in notation related to this?
So yes, the ballerina appears initially as a boy, a servant boy, and then changes into a girl. In the source novella, the devil also appears as a dog and a bird and various other creatures. But yeah, the interesting thing is although on one hand the seductive figure is a woman, prima ballerina, there is a cross-trending and sort of a mixture of, it's an interesting ballet in the sense that it actually really does experiment with sexuality in an intriguing way, at least initially, because in the ballet, like in the novel, you do have Satanilla appearing as a boy before becoming and revealing herself to be female. So there's this double bind. And I would say that actually this aspect of the ballet was censored. It was actually cut from the Madrid production. So the idea of gender crossing was actually something that was eliminated as a kind of an affront, I suppose, to sensibility. So that was one of the more controversial elements of the work. And in the end, when it got to Russia, that element was suppressed altogether, and she just appears as a sort of, fetching, beautiful female character.
Okay, thank you everybody. Thanks a lot, Simon, for your research and your answers. We have to continue with the next panel. So thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you then. Bye.